Pied Piper by Black Hole CA. Read by Mika. Chapter 17. Absolute Zero. I think I died. The boy murmurs quietly, distraught. His voice barely above a whisper, until his words begin to take on a more hysterical note. I think he killed me. What? Neo's brows furrow inward, confusion pulling at his features. What are you talking about? He killed me, the 15-year-old repeats, sucking in a sharp breath as he stares down at their overlapping hands. Tsukauchi's grip tightens gently, a comforting squeeze, a grounding one. Midoriya, you're not dead. His quirk. It killed me. Neo searches his friend's face, looking for something that he doesn't find. Was it some sort of illusionary quirk? Did he show you your death, or... No, Tsukauchi. Izuku whispers quietly. I died. Midoriya finally looks up, gaze latching desperately onto Neo's. In the younger boy's eyes, the 17-year-old can see where the void is formed, can see where the stars in his eyes have collapsed into black holes. Midoriya's pupils serve as their singularities. His irises their encompassing accretion discs, one a flaming crimson and the other a blazing jade. The stars that had once resided within Izuku's viridescent eyes have come irrevocably undone. And Neo can see just how terribly gravity has crushed them, can see how mercilessly it had forced those stars to collapse. He watches as the black holes pull in all, sucking out the life and hope and joy that had once resided in its place. Neo finds himself unable to move for a moment, struck by just how terribly haunted Midoriya's eyes look. You're not hurt, are you? No. But Neo can see the way Izuku's limbs tremble, and rouses himself into checking the other boy, worried that he might be in shock. He looks for signs of blood or bruises, but finds no more than the Vigilante usually has. Tsukauchi looks back up, searching Midoriya's eyes. Do you want to tell me what happened? Neo shifts, sitting down on the floor and crossing his legs, Midoriya following his example. Izuku takes a moment, before his mouth parts shakily. I thought I was finally going to get her, he whispers. I thought I'd finally be able to save her. More tears well up in the teen's already red eyes. But I fucked it up again, the boy hisses, tears spilling over. I got some intel about where the 8 precepts were, and I was following up on it. Neo tenses at the mention of the group's name, watching as crystalline tears slip down Midoriya's flushed cheeks. I was just looking around the neighborhood they were supposed to be in, and I ran into one of the members. Izuku's voice shakes, fear bubbling up inside his chest like magma. Tsukauchi is quirk, took me apart. It killed me. I wasn't sure what happened at first. My mind was all in pieces, but he killed me. I know it. Midoriya's voice takes on a hysterical note, hands shaking uncontrollably now. All he did was brush my fingers. A sob bubbles up through his lips. And then there was nothing. Nao wakes up first, rising only a few hours later, the sky just a few shades lighter than it had been when he'd fallen asleep. He could have slept another hour or two before he would have actually needed to be up, but he rouses himself for Midoriya's sake. The boy had ended up staying over for the night, passing out on a futon Reo had pulled from his closet. The 15-year-old, too emotionally unstable for the teen to let his friend leave in good conscience. Takachi slowly pushes himself up, staring down at the younger boy through hazy eyes. He's still asleep, breathing quietly, peacefully, too tired to dream. Midoriya had called into himself sometime during the night, rolling over to face Dao's bed. Takachi's chest aches when he remembers just how distraught the boy had been just hours earlier. How terrified. The boy's hair is ruffled, and the dark circles strung beneath his eyes have never looked so saturated before. But Dale would be willing to accept both as the new normal, as long as the next time his friend's eyes fluttered open, that those black holes he had seen last night were gone. Takachi picks himself quietly up from his bed, its frame creaking from its shifting weight. The 17-year-old carefully steps over Midoriya's body, making his way to where he'd plugged the younger boy's phone in earlier. It's barely 6, but Nao unlocks the phone and types out a new message to Inko. Izuku. I couldn't sleep well last night, so I'm out on a run. I've got my uniform with me and I already ate, so I'll see you after practice is out. Love you. Nao lets out a sigh once it's delivered, and there's no immediate response, praying that the woman doesn't question the lie. Takachi's mouth stretches into a yawn before he slips out of his room to start some rice. Mom. That's fine, sweetie. Just be safe. I love you too. Midoriya wakes up slowly, his gaze heavy and unfocused. He feels numb. He can hear the quiet murmur of life seeping through Takachi's cracked bedroom door. The 15-year-old gently pushes himself up into a seated position. He looks around blearily, glancing out the window to watch light slant down the alley walls outside, as the sun finally breaks over the tops of the surrounding buildings. Nao slips into the room from behind him, his hair damp and school pants already on. He makes a few quiet shuffling noises to alert the younger boy to his presence before he speaks. I made some rice and heated up some miso soup for breakfast. You might not be hungry, but I'd suggest eating something. Worry stains over Takachi's amber eyes, as Midoriya pulls one of their hero blankets over his shoulders, merely nodding his head along in response. Nao sighs, slipping back out the door to grab the younger boy some food, bringing back 2 small bowls. He hands one directly to his friend, and sets aside the other for later. Do you think you'll go to school today? Izuku quietly lifts a bite of rice into his mouth, before gently shaking his head no. You'll be fine if you don't go, right? Midoriya stares silently at the wall as he bobs his head. My teachers won't call home, he murmurs quietly. It's the first words he's spoken since last night, and Nail can't help but feel a little relieved after hearing the boy's voice. I'll have to go to the dojo, though. I don't usually miss training, so Ch.17 would ask Mum where I am. Sakauchi turns towards his closet, keeping the 15-year-old in his peripheral as he continues to slowly eat through the small portions Nail had handed him. I handled everything with your mum, by the way. Midoriya takes a sluggish sip of miso, as the older boy pulls a plain button-up out and slips it over his t-shirt he's already wearing. I texted her to say that you left early. Midoriya makes a note of confirmation, before he returns to his bowl of rice as the amber-eyed boy finishes buttoning up his shirt. My mum is at a conference for the next week, so you're safe to stay here until you have to leave if you want. Sakauchi shoves his school blazer into his backpack for later, before slinging his bag over his shoulder. You've still got an extra pair of clothes in my closet that you left here the other week, too. But you're free to wear something of mine if you want. Nail looks down at his friend, as the younger boy lets out a quiet breath, setting aside the only half-empty bowl of rice with the finished bowl of miso. He rewraps the hero blanket tightly around his shoulder, like a lifeline. Thanks. The 17-year-old lets out a quiet sigh, setting his backpack down as he approaches the younger boy. He quietly kneels and places a gentle hand on Izuku's shoulder. Midoriya doesn't flinch or shrug it off, so Naol wraps him in an awkward hug. Izuku stills in his arms for only a moment, before he relaxes beneath his friend's embrace. His body convulses with a barely restrained sob, the teen's face twisting into an ugly mask of grief. His teeth are bared, and his brows are pulled almost painfully inward, as more unrestrained tears spill from his already bloodshot eyes. He buries his face into his friend's shoulder blade, wetting his shirt with tears and snot and saliva, as his hands grab at the back of it, balling the fabric between his fists. Just wanted to save her, he sobs. Maybe Takashi Reo shows up to class 30 minutes late. Maybe he wishes he hadn't had to leave in the first place. After the 17-year-old leaves, Midoriya finds himself alone in the Sakauchi household. Neo had switched on the television in the living room, before he had reluctantly left for school, and Izuku can hear the early afternoon cartoons drowning at the edge of his consciousness. He curled back into the futon Sakauchi had rolled out for him, staring at the empty space between Neo's somewhat organized work desks. I died, he thinks. He killed me. The thoughts wrap around his mind, coiling around the fleshy organ like a boa had found its prey. With the boy still trying to rebuild what little mental defenses he'd had before his death, his mind had found itself at its weakest. And, like any other virus, the voice in his head made its ugly existence known, taking advantage of his vulnerability. He'd become used to the voice, had become used to drowning it out or ignoring it. But he's weak right now. Weaker than ever before, and for the first time he can see it. His heart clenches violently in his chest, and Nao's parting words of, "Call me if you need to talk," evaporate beneath the radiant heat of his fear. In the darkness of his mind, it appears even darker. Darker than the scorch marks blasted across his belongings, darker than the void that had formed in his eyes. Its face is the face of many, pasted like paper-thin party masks all worn at once, shifting and sliding to suit its needs. Nothing about it is human, but it holds on to its humanoid form, flaunting it like one would costume jewelry. Tar black blood drips from its grinning maw as it pulls apart. Its voice reverberates through his skull.
"The dangers of hero work without a quirk,"
it hisses, sly grin growing.
"Simply too high."
The multitude of masks shift.
How did you fool yourself into thinking that you could save anyone? You can't even save yourself.
Midoriya's eyes snap closed as he curls further into himself. He presses his hands tightly against his ears, but it does nothing to drown out the multitude of voices. Jiru unenthusiastically watches the dead-on-his-feet 15-year-old enter the dojo. He looks closer to a cadaver than a living person, and there's a moment where she wonders if his being here is the work of some sort of necromancy quirk. He greets her tiredly as he slips off his shoes at the door, leaving them in one of the cubbies. "Midoriya, you look awful." She expects some excuse about studying late, or not being able to sleep, or some extra snarky comeback that would give the woman some semblance of normalcy. But the only response she gets from him is a breathily exhaled, "Hi," that sets her on edge. He makes to brush past her, but the woman quickly steps in front of him. "Midoriya," she says again. "Go home." Admittedly, there weren't many times where she'd sent the boy home early, and there were even fewer occasions where she'd sent him home outright. Usually, he'd fight the command, claiming that he was fine, that he was okay, that he just stayed up a little too late or had pushed himself just a little too hard. He blinks up at her, and for once, Jiru imagines that his eyes look more void-like than her own. He murmurs a quiet, "Hi, Sensei," before turning around and slipping his shoes back on. He walks out with another word, and that is perhaps the most disturbing thing she'd seen from him in all their years of having known each other. The other students that have already arrived offer each other wary glances. They are too shocked by the boy's actions. Jiru anxiously taps her foot against the floor, before she finally turns away and pulls out her phone, pulling up Midoriya Inko's contact info. She bypasses her other students, slipping into her office for more privacy as she presses call. The other woman doesn't let the phone ring long, before she's hurriedly answering the call. Ch.17. The mother sounds worried. Is everything all right? Is Izuku okay? Jiro sighs at the anxiety in Inko's voice. He's not injured, Midoriya-san, but he seems very out of it, completely unlike himself. I sent him home. I don't know what's wrong with him, but it'll probably be for the best to keep him out of the dojo until he's feeling better. On the other end of the phone, Inko worries nervously at her lower lip. I haven't seen him today. He left early this morning. I'll be sure to talk to him. Thank you for telling me. Jiro pinches at the bridge of her nose. Please take care of him, Midoriya-san. Midoriya Inko comes home to find someone so unlike her starry-eyed son that it scares her. She doesn't know what happened to the son that had resided in his chest, but it looks as if it had been taken to be drowned in an ocean, 300 times its size. He's curled up on the couch when she arrives, staring absent-mindedly at the TV that's before him. Sweetie? Inko ventures quietly, gently drawing his attention. Izuku startles at the new voice, throwing himself up. He looks wildly around the room before his eyes land on his mother, and relaxes. Mom, welcome home. Inko sets down her purse as she slowly walks towards the boy, taking his hands in her own. Chi-san said that she sent you home early, Izuku. He nods slowly. Right, she did that. Sweetheart. The woman looks desperately into the boy's eyes. What's going on? The 15-year-old looks at her with blank confusion. I was just watching TV. Izuku. Her grip on his hands tighten. The TV isn't even on. Nail comes home to an apartment devoid of people. He'd been expecting it, but he still feels his chest clench just the slightest. Sakauchi slips his shoes off at the door as he lets out a tired sigh. I'm home. Part of him wishes that Midoriya would have been here when he came back, if only so he could make sure his friend was doing okay. The 17-year-old falls into bed, staring at the ceiling. He was emotionally exhausted from the last 24 hours, barely able to pull himself through all of his classes. Sakauchi rolls over, facing his work table. He makes to close his eyes, just to take a nap before he gets around to finishing one of his projects for school, but his gaze catches on something alarming. Nail slowly pushes himself back up, eyes locked onto the dark burgundy of the foreign object that has invaded the empty space of his work desks. The boy stands, worryingly approaching it. He flicks on his desk lamp, studying the object. Piper's belt. All of the smoke grenades and eskrima sticks still attached. Did he forget it? Maybe something broke. Nao looks around the desk for a note that might explain its sudden appearance, but finds nothing. Did he leave it here for later? But the belt resting on the corner of the desk, and the pipe sitting on the fire escape, and the boots in the back of the closet, and the clothes wadded beneath the bed, all of it. Every last piece of Midoriya's vigilante gear stays there overnight, with no sign of their owner. And they wait there the next night as well. And the next. And the next. Until the 17-year-old is forced to rehome Piper's infamous staff, somewhere inside because of the threat of rain. And the clothes under his bed are hidden inside a box of spare parts, and the belt and its gear in a case of unfinished projects. The sun rises and sets, and every new cycle becomes another day without the vigilante Pied Piper. Naomasa's chair creaks as he leans back in his seat, worry scoring deep lines into the man's face. So there haven't been any reports or sightings of Piper recently? Sansa shakes his head, the bell at his throat jingling quietly. Not within the last several days. He's gone completely IA. The detective stares up nervously at the ceiling, chewing on his lower lip. It's not the first time that he's taken a break, but 5 days definitely takes the record. It's usually only ever a day or two, max, that he disappears for. Takashi pulls his head up again, staring at the spread of reports and files beginning to clutter his desk. I worry that he's gotten seriously injured this time. The man pulls a hand through his hair, pulling at it gently in an effort to alleviate the headache he can feel coming on. We know that he has contact with some sort of medic, so checking hospitals would be a useless endeavor. What about the last time he was seen? Do we have a report on it? He could already be dead. The man shakes his head, burying the thought. Now's not the time to be thinking like that. Sansa lets out a defeated sigh. It's nothing that would help us, I'm afraid. The last report we have is on some low-level drug dealer. Naomasa pinches at the bridge of his nose, all at once exhausted and drained, and ready to sleep for the next 12 hours. Where did you go? And then suddenly, the detective freezes, memories rising to answer his silent question, his tiredness burning away like the early morning fog. The girl. Tamakawa looks up in confusion, golden eyes searching Tsukachi's face for answers. The girl? Of course it's the girl. Naomasa murmurs, completely ignoring the other officer in his fervor as he scrambles to pick up his phone. He quickly scrolls through his contact list before finally landing on the one he needs. He taps his foot impatiently as the phone rings before someone finally picks up. This is the Night Eye Agency. How may I help you? Naomasa recognizes the voice. Bubble Girl. I need to talk to Sir Night Eye immediately. Detective Tsukachi? I'll patch you through. Please give me a moment. It's only a few more seconds before Soa's voice bleeds through the speaker, and Naomasa starts speaking before the hero even has time to finish his greeting. I need to know if that Yakuza group you've been watching has done anything as of late. On the other end of the phone, Night Eye releases a tired sigh. Not to my knowledge. We've managed to track them back down to 2 more locations since your first call, and Centipede believes he is getting closer to discovering the location of the main base. The hero readjusts his glasses, pushing them further up his nose. They have a few small side bases scattered around, or of the ones we've found, none have shown any extraordinary suspicious activity as of late. Naomasa breathes a curse through his teeth, standing to pace the area near his desk. Tamakawa's eyes shift to follow his motion. Piper, the one that tipped us off to the 8 Precepts' involvement with that white-haired girl, seems to have gone missing over the last few days. And you're worried? Night Eye asks. The detective makes a noise of agreement. He's just a kid himself, no older than your intern. The hero turns in his seat, studying the poster on the wall behind him. That is troublesome, then. This group is proving themselves to be a powerful one. If he managed to get himself labeled as a potential threat, then there is a strong possibility that they would act against him given the chance. Naomasa sends a hand up to tug gently at his hair, wrapping his fingers around the dark strands in a useless attempt to relieve his worry. I'll ask Centipede and Bubble Girl about him, see if they might have seen or heard anything while doing their reconnaissance. I'll do what I can to find out any information, but try not to hope too strongly for anything, Detective. Hey, it's Mika. Remember when I said I'd upload frequently? Well, I promise every reason I missed last week, I got COVID. So, also, if you notice my voice is a little sketchy in the next 3 or so uploads, that's probably why. Anyway, here's the ending segment. Youngest spawn of the hag. Bot. No, Pillow, don't talk! You have to keep mewing! Pillow. Be gone!